I'm Mel.
And I'm Mark.
And this is the Cerebral Sports Podcast. On the Cerebral Sports Podcast, we champion the mental development, wellness, and health of athletes, big, small, professional, and amateur.
Week to week, we'll have compelling conversations with athletes, coaches, parents, and mental health professionals to discuss their experiences and point of views as we work to bring awareness to the most vital muscle in an athlete's body, the mind.
All right, we're back here with another great episode. We have a very special guest here on our show, Coach Randy Moore. Coach Randy Moore is obviously, as always, a dear friend of mine, one of the guys that I count on as one of my mentors. But more importantly, he is a football coach, right? He's been coaching for over 15 years at the collegiate level. He's traveled from LIU Post to Allegheny College to Lock Haven. He's currently right now at the University of Rochester. He's a guy that does it the right way. He's in it for all the right reasons. He is what I consider to be a player's coach. And I'm very interested to see exactly where his perspective is on what we talk about here, which is the mental half of the game. Me and my co-host Marman, we've known him. He actually coached us both in college. So this is going to be a very interesting conversation, one that we're looking forward to and very excited about. Without further ado, man, Coach Moore, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Mel. I appreciate it. I'm blessed. I'm proud to be on your show with you guys. Man, it makes me feel good to see you two young fellas doing the right thing.
Well, you say young fellas, man. I feel good hearing that word young because I don't look at myself as young anymore. But
Speak for yourself. Speak for yourself.
All right. Okay. I see where we're going. So, Coach Moore, man, I know I gave a quick, brief introduction. Is there anything that I left out that you want to kind of tap in before we kind of dive into the show?
Sure. I think, one stop that was very important on my journey was I also coached high school football for a time at Holy Cross High School. And I think that really got me started on wanting to be a coach and kind of recognizing the impact that coaches have on young men's lives. So I wanted to make sure I threw that in there because I think it's very, very important.
Yeah, and you're also a Holy Cross alumni, right?
Yes, sir.
All right, good. A Holy Cross alum, LIU Post alum, and then you started to travel through it, man. So I'm gonna start it off, man. First things first, Coach. What made you get into coaching? What was it that you saw in the profession that brought you to your beginnings of coaching?
Well, football is very important in my life. It's provided me many, many opportunities in my life. It allowed me or helped me get into Holy Cross High School. It helped me get into LIU Post, which we call CW Post. It now helps me provide for my family. I always say if you love the game, it'll love you back. So it's been a blessing for me in my life. One of the things that kind of coincided with football was strong male role models. Throughout my life, I've been blessed with strong male role models at all of my different stops, in my football journey. I wouldn't be, where I am today without those strong male role models. So I wanted to do that with someone else. I wanted to be that strong male role model for other young men that I met, on my journey. So I use football as the vehicle, that it allows me to reach guys like yourself and Marlon, and now I get to see you guys having a positive impact, on our society.
Got you. So when it comes to coaching, right, outside of the X's and O's, and we're here to talk about the mental half and just the overall evolution of the game and overall evolution of the player. What are some of the things that you have seen change from when you was a player to when you first began to coach to where you are currently right now within the athlete, right? What are some of the things that you saw change?
That's a great question. I think one of the things that is very, very apparent right now is you have to include the why in the explanation. When I was a student athlete, a coach told you, hey, do this, or we need you to do that. And you didn't ask why. It was almost fresh, right? Or disrespectful to say, why? Why should I do that? Why do I need to do that? With today's athlete, the why is very important. I added into the initial explanation of the technique or the scheme or whatever the case may be, because, a lot of today's athletes are exposed to receiving so much information, right? So they want that information. And if you don't provide that, it's very hard for them, for them to do their jobs.
Yeah, the why and also the instant, right? That's another thing you see with the athletes. Like they want some instant information, they want instant gratification. So you were able to. Was that an easy transition for you as a coach, dealing with that new layer of explanation? Did you find frustration in the beginning parts of it, and then eventually kind of conform to the new athlete?
To be honest, I didn't find it to be difficult because I have a lot of younger siblings and I deal with young men on a constant basis. So I kind of felt it and seen it coming as before it came, right? And it's here now. I think the difficulty lies in the different ways I need to present that information because everyone learns differently, right? Some guys need to see it on film. Some guys, you can talk it through with them. Some guys need to do it wrong 6 times and see themselves doing it wrong and see someone else do it right in order to get it right, So finding the different ways to present that information has been challenging. But I mean, with so many tools today, I mean, you just have to be creative, to be honest.
Gotcha.
Amazing. I'm gonna have to jump in here, man. I got to give it up for my coach. This was my position coach at outside linebacker. I tell it to everyone that will listen. I said, if I had this man for the 4 years in total that I was there, how many years were we together? 2? Was it 2 years?
Yeah,
I said if I had him initially, my career would have went a little differently.
Sure.
But that's neither here nor there. But I want to give it up for him because he was super patient. And some of the things that you're talking about that you just touched on is you've always been super patient. So you referencing, you having younger siblings and you not really feeling like you had to, I guess, adjust too much to providing the whys to your players. That resonates with me because I remember how you were as a coach. Like I can't remember a time I really see you lose your cool. Like, you were always very personable, very relatable. And at that, you were a lot younger at that time, obviously. So I wonder now, like as you,
man, I'm still young.
No, you're still young. No.
I look great right now.
You look great. You look great. So you don't look any different to me. You don't look any different to me. But I want to know, does that change? I always wondered that. Does that change for coaches as the career goes along? Is there a point where you're no longer kind of like that player coach? You're no longer relatable as time goes on, the players get younger and things change. Are you no longer as relatable to players, or is that just something that you either have or don't?
Well, you transition. I'm more mature now, right? So now my jokes are dad jokes, It is what it is. I'm a dad. I got 4 daughters. My jokes are dad jokes, But at the same time, I've transitioned from being a player's coach to being, your uncle. So I could be some of these players' dads at this point,
right?
And so I talk to them like a mature man. Like it is what it is, And what hasn't changed about me is my patience. That's one of the things I make sure that I do on a daily basis. If you need 10 minutes, if you need 15 minutes, if you need a half hour, if you just want to sit down and what we call chop it up and have a conversation, I'm always willing to do that and share my life experiences, with my players. I don't, it's a cliche, but I think it's so true, man. Players don't care about what you know until they know you care, and the way I kind of get that across is I have to be open with my players and be able, willing to expose, what's happened to me, so they feel that comfortability with talking to me.
Absolutely, man. That's well said. And I really believe that we're in an era now where coaches like you are the ones that are going to flourish. Coaches that cannot, provide that comfort, cannot provide that relatability, cannot, build that connective tissue with players as far as, being vulnerable with them about themselves, their journey, things like that, as opposed to just kind of like speaking at players. Those coaches are going to die off. Like you look at a man like, Deion Sanders. Now, obviously, Deion Sanders has a ton of cachet. He's a legend. He has a ton of leverage with his situation. But when Deion speaks, you listen because he's giving. He's giving from his gut, giving from his soul. And kudos to you for being one of those type of guys.
Right. I appreciate that, Marlon. That's what I'm aiming for. So to know I'm right on target, man, I'm excited.
You're on target. Go ahead, Mal.
Go ahead, Coach. What you got?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, awareness is different now, man. We're talking about mental health and we're talking about sports psychology. Like the kids have access to this information. In the past, we wouldn't know what Prime was saying to his players. We would have no idea the relationship that he has with social media and the instant information you can get. The kids know there's something different. My coach doesn't have to act that way. That is not real life. That is not acceptable. That is not. Why should I play for him when I can play for somebody else?
Mm-hmm. You have options.
You have options. For sure. And you're aware of your options now. You know, kids are aware of their options. Yeah.
Equally though, I wonder, what do you think is the responsibility of the player? Because players listen to this, parents listen to this. What is the responsibility of the player to allow you and give you the ability to be that type of coach and leader? What should they provide and bring to the table?
That's a great question. And I'm gonna say, I didn't have the easiest life. So as a young man, I was guarded, right? And so I understand sometimes it's not about the player. I'm a grown man and these kids are guarded for a reason. I know I was guarded for a reason. Speak for myself. I was guarded for a reason, So, coaches, extending the olive branch first and making the effort, I think it's my responsibility, to be really honest with you.
Okay.
To be really honest with you, I think players need to be, to be accepting, but let me prove to you that you should accept me in, you know what I mean? And we'll go from there.
Amazing, man.
I definitely think that too, especially from the coaching standpoint. Like these athletes now, they all have the information. They all know what the right way of coaching is and the wrong way is, right? But these players they're not stupid, right?
No.
They can smell it. They can see genuineness. They can see authenticity. They can see when it's not. They can see when it's all a game. You know what I mean? And if they don't see it right away, as soon as they step foot into that program and they start practicing, they instantly will know and they will get themselves into that transfer portal and get out of there, right? So I think it's very important that from the coaching standpoint, that we are very authentic. And if you are who you are, just be who you are and let the athletes make a decision for if they want to play for you or not very early on, right? Don't play games with these young athletes because you're only going to waste your time, right? But speaking to that point, Coach, and I know that you as a coach, you've done a great job with connecting and being, real and down to earth with your players and having a space for them to come talk to you if there's issues that come up. But how is it from the university standpoint, right? Because you've been at each level at this point, right? You've been at mostly every level. Do you guys have the support system inside the programs that you're currently coaching where these athletes can talk to someone outside of you as coaches? Or do you guys serve as that pillar as well?
So we just talked about, players accepting the help or opening themselves up. So each stop of the way, universities, in my opinion, do make an effort to provide the services and the support that I think student athletes need. Now, whether those student athletes accept that help, ask for that help, seek that help out, and then follow up with that help is a totally different, conversation. But I think the support is there for student athletes if they seek it out. And sometimes, again, you have to be proactive and speak up for yourself to get those services. At certain places, it's harder than others, for sure. At certain places I've coached along the way, I've had to take students to those, different places and sit down with them and make sure they go. And I'm a victim of maybe not doing the best job at times of making sure that happens. But I think the students need to be open to receiving those services, and for the majority, all of the institutions that I've been to provide those services, and those services are available.
Gotcha. I know one thing that we did at Post, and for me going forward with my guys currently right now, I do mental health checks once a week, right? Where we sit down. It's usually before the game, kind of get them into that mood. But I find it where it's open, right? And it's a safe space for these kids to speak. And if I can't provide the help, at least I can identify who may need the help and try to get them into the right space. You as a player at Post, and I know Coach Collins was one of the people that we spoke about yesterday on the phone a little bit. He had some things that he did with his players before each and every game. Can you speak to that a little bit, give the listeners a little bit about that, and then see how maybe you've picked up some of those things along the way?
100%, man. We had a sports psychologist. His name was Dr. Izzo. We called him the witch doctor. This is in 2000, right? So, late 90s, early 2000, Dr. Izzo, and I always say Dr. Izzo was the man. I think he changed the lives of a lot of us and didn't really know it. He had a crystal bowl. He used to, it used to make this frequency, this noise, this sound, which would kind of have you and help you kind of channel in. And he would talk us through some things, and imagery was one of those things. I tell my guys now, we have to dream about it. What's it look like? What's it smell like? What's it feel like? How are you going to feel once you succeed, right? And positive mental imagery for me is one of the strongest tools, because I think your mind is the strongest muscle in your body. So having that positive mental imagery is one of the things I get across to my guys as soon as I possibly can. And I'll take it back to their best high school game. And I'll explain to them, I say, okay, tell me about your best high school game. And a lot of guys, they kind of get started, and I let them talk. And what happens is you only remember snippets of the game. You don't remember the full game. You remember like 3 or 4 key plays in that game that you made that made you feel the best you've ever felt in your life. And I say, okay, remember that feeling? And now how do we get that back? Like, how do we get back to that space? Right? And remember you making that play. How did that feel? What did it look like? Did you hear your parents in the stands? Did the band go crazy? Did the teammates go crazy? Like, tell me what happened. And so we talk about that from an imagery standpoint, and I try to relate that and connect that to what they're doing here in college.
I like it.
So yeah, I do. It's amazing, man. And something you're talking about, connecting with your players and talking to them. You have been now at 4 different stops, 4 or 5 different stops, including Holy Cross in high school. Being at the level that you are now, or coaching at this school now, do you see a difference in player types, or their personalities at these different stops? Or is it kind of like, coach at one school, you coach at them all, or coach a group of players, you coach at them all? Do you see like differences? And if so, what are the differences?
Every stop along the way has been a little unique. The players have been a little unique. And one of my stops, and I'm not going to name, the schools, but at one of my stops, it was about, kind of cutting out the distractions, because there was so much going on. There was so much to do. At another one of my stops, it was about, just focusing the students on the task at hand. Because again, there was so much outside noise for whatever reason. And at a different stop, it's about, two of the stops were high academic schools, and their identity, it was profound for me, because their identity is not necessarily wrapped up in being a college football player. Right? I still, my story is I'm a college football player, college football coach. It's all about football. And some of the high academic schools, their identity is not wrapped up in being a college athlete or being a college football player. Like, they have, and we all have different interests, but they are actively and progressively exploring those different interests. And football is important to them, but it's not overly important. Like, it's even with their other interests. You know what I mean? And so I had to learn that, working at these high academic schools, like, wait a minute, coach, I know I'm not going to play professional football, but I am going to be a CEO. I am going to be an engineer. I am going to be a doctor or a dentist. I am going to be, a politician. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, so, yeah, I love football, but I have to make time and space and energy for these other things that I'm exploring as well.
Working with students at these schools that prioritize academia more, and the students prioritize their futures in, business, and they recognize that football is just a part of their story, not going to be like the be all end all. What was that adjustment like for you to connect with those players, being someone who was, probably a different type of player and coach, where football was more of your world than probably theirs?
To be honest, it's refreshing for both of us, because they play football for a reason. Like, they need that break from being, so focused on academics that it's refreshing for them to get to me. And I'm not asking them any questions about engineering. You know, I'm like, listen, we're going to see power this week. This is how we got to prepare. We got to fit. This is how we got to play it. And then for me, to be honest with you, it's refreshing. I've, you know, in past stops, again, man, I'm not complaining at all, but I've had to take students by the hand, bring them to the library, and sit with them in the library in order for them to achieve the task they need to complete. You know, here it's like, listen, you have to leave the library at some point. You know, you do need sleep. You know, you have sleep is important. And you know, some guys had to drag out of the cafeterias. Here, I'm like, listen, are you eating? Like, you can't not eat. You gotta, you know, like, I know you want to study, but can't you study and eat at the same time? Like, you know,
Yeah.
It's just a different challenge. For me, it's refreshing. I like new challenges, so it's not really a big deal for me.
Y'all providing a balance to each other, so that's healthy. That's very healthy.
Speaking of balance, man, one thing that you see in the news nowadays, especially when related to student athletes coming out of COVID, you know, being back into a full flow of work, schoolwork. Some of these people have jobs that they have to provide for themselves, and then balancing sport. There's a lot of stress on these young athletes, right? And I think you spoke to it just now. You had to drag them out of the library, you know, make sure they eat, all those great things. What are some of the things that, if you were an athlete, that you would do, right? That it's being that you're around the athletes consistently, what are some of the things that you can do, maybe within the routine, to make sure that work-life balance is there at all times? Is there some checklist that they should be kind of following that you could provide to them at this point, just for the listeners, right? So the listeners listening to it and they're taking up all of this information. What are some of the things they should definitely do every day? Let's do like 1 day routine.
So what's interesting is at each stop you learn something different. So at the University of Rochester, I work for a head coach named Chad Martinovich. He brought this plan with him that he uses, that he has used, and I'm sure he's borrowed it from other coaches. But we have our players create a daily life plan, a weekly life plan. So on certain apps on your phone, you have access to a calendar, and it breaks it down to a smaller, you know, the smallest increment being the hour or by the minute, right? So you can map out your day, every hour of every day of your week. So one of the things we do is that we have our students, you know, map out their week. You know, when are you going to eat? When are you going to study? Tell me when your classes are, when you have to lift, you know, when are you going to call your girlfriend? Oh, coach, I don't have a girlfriend. Okay. When are you going to call your mother? You know what I'm saying? Like, when you're going to do your laundry. And we have them kind of map out their week. And as we go through the schedule, you know, with our student athletes, we're like, hey, well, you forgot when you're going to play video games. Oh, coach, listen, just give an hour for yourself to some leisure time, right? And one of the things that it helps our student athletes do is kind of, number one is prioritize, right? But number two is like understand that as a student athlete, there are enough hours in a day for you to accomplish everything you need to accomplish, right? You're going to have a social life. You're going to have, of course, your academics. And of course, you know, you're going to have responsibilities with football, right? With your sport. So just kind of mapping out your day so you can prioritize what's important and what's not. So again, so you don't waste an hour at the CAF and hanging out. It's an hour you miss studying, right? So yeah, that's why you're up at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, still studying, because you wasted an hour, or you wasted 2 hours, you know, doing something else. And so that's one of the things we use here that I think that I'm going to bring with me wherever I go, because I think it just helps student athletes kind of just get a snapshot of what I have to accomplish today. You know, how many hours do I have? You know, we joked around. Marlon said, you know, hard stop at 9:20. You know what I mean? Like, that's important. Honestly, that's important. You know, and you don't realize it until you get to be an adult.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, sitting down talking to you guys and losing time. Like, oh shoot, I got, you know, somewhere to be. I have to go real fast, right? But you know, so we help our student athletes, you know, early on understand, you know, how valuable their time is and how they can kind of prioritize their time and just manage their time management, right? So manage their time to accomplish the things they need to accomplish.
I think with that too, what you said, and even Marlon, you know, with the hard stop, what that really is, and it's something I got to do a better job of. It's really setting boundaries, right?
Sure.
So we're talking about prioritizing time, making sure that we, you know, utilize every second of the day effectively, but also we set boundaries, right? We set that boundary, like you said, play video games, right? So nothing else outside of me playing video games. I'm not going to be distracted by if Coach Moore calls me and says, hey, you need to watch your film. I'm not doing that right now. I'm setting a boundary. This is what I need to do to make sure I have some space to have a disconnect, because that's very important. The other question I have for you, especially, I know Marlon said to it, these high academic schools with this stress and pressure of having success, right? You got to win games in football, right? You got to win some games. You may not be able to win all of the games, but you want to have some success on the field. And then with the high academics, depending on the school that you're currently, going to, the GPA requirement, falling below that, it's a problem, right? And that could be very stressful to these athletes. And having both of those important things at the same time can really, really add a whole nother layer of just anxiety, et cetera, right? What do you do with that? What do you do to the athlete then? What do you to yourself as well as a coach, right? Because you got those added pressures as well.
Well,
how do you cope?
Yeah, man, sport and college sport is a fantastic vehicle. It's a fantastic tool. Yes, we want everything to happen beautifully for our children and for them to have success in everything that they do. But to be honest with you, that's not life, right? Real life happens and sometimes you fail. So helping students through their failures at times is more important than helping them when they have success or helping them to gain success. Helping them navigate, okay, you failed this test. Why did you fail the test? Like, what do you need to do better next time to not fail this test? Or, hey, we lost this game. So what do we need to do to make sure we don't lose the next game? Powerful comment I always make to my guys is listen, when we have failures, I don't point at anyone. I always want to ask myself, what could I have done better to help us win that football game, right? So we go through the process of looking at and examining their failures in order to prepare them to be successful. What do you have to do differently? All right. Remember when I told you to go to tutoring and you told me you got this? Well, maybe you don't, and so you need to go to tutoring, and sometimes, of course, me being Coach Moore is my suggestions and not suggestions. I just told you what to do, right? So that is Marlon. Right? So
I know.
Right.
I know all too well, man.
Right. So and so helping students through their failures to achieve success feels fantastic. Again, it's a great feeling that, I get text messages, Coach, I got a 95 on my test. I got an A. I'm like, that's fantastic, great job. They walk in the hallway, it's like a mosh pit. We attack them right away, man, celebrating their success, knowing that student just overcame something. Like watching people and students overcome, my student athletes overcome their struggles, it feels great. It feels great.
Amazing, man. That's amazing. So, something that, you have such a great experience, wide spanning. If you were to give some advice to, up and coming high school football athletes, say like, at least, a varsity athlete, if you had to tell them to focus on 3 things to help their career, help them get to college and flourish and enjoy their experience, what would you kind of tell them to focus on?
That's a great question, Marlon. So I've been watching a lot of videos and podcasts, listening to a lot of podcasts, and something that's piqued my interest recently. And I know it may be old to some people, but I always look for different motivators. The Mamba mentality, right? Kobe Bryant's Mamba mentality, and how basically his work ethic was unparalleled, right? And the things he did to achieve his goals and become one of the best basketball players on the planet, and how he dedicated his time, effort, and energy to perfecting his craft, and what that looks like. And so if I were to give any advice to high school athletes, I would challenge them to give, it's really interesting. Give it a try. People are scared of failure, right? So they won't really give it a try. Like, give it a try. So incorporate that Mamba mentality, dedicate your time, effort, and energy to achieving something, and let's see what happens, and we'll go from there, and that's the advice I would give to student athletes. And I mean, academically, apply yourself academically, and let's see what happens. Yeah. Athletically, apply yourself athletically, and let's see how far you can go. And socially as well. Like, what does it feel like to be a leader and be out there on that limb, right? And how does that feel? And you know, I read a book the other day, and it said the only way to be a good leader is to try and fail to be a leader, right? Learn from your mistakes. It takes trial and error, you know. It takes those successes and it takes those failures to become a good leader. That's how you create good leaders. You give them opportunities to lead, right? And then you coach them through a better way to do it, or give them a different thought process on how to do it, right? So for student athletes, I would tell them to challenge themselves and attack things with that Mamba mentality.
Amazing. So speaking of good leaders, you spoke to having, you know, a good amount of people who played significant roles in your life. You know, they've had impact. You know I had it. I had Coach Gill, I had you. And I think, like, you know, and no disrespect to any of the other coaches, I related to you guys the most when you gave a message, it landed the most compared to, you know, other coaches perhaps. Because again, like that genuineness, you know, it just connected differently. Who did you have? Like, does anyone stand out to you in your career that kind of like helped, you know, your drive, you know, your progress? Does anyone come to mind for you?
Well, honestly, you know, there's so many people I could name, but I'd be remiss if I didn't say my mother, right? You know, my mom was a very strong woman. Her work ethic and drive and her grind and watching her succeed and fail and go through life was inspirational, to say the least. You know, so my mom was that shining role model for me, growing up, because you couldn't tell me there was something that my mother couldn't do, you know. So watching her go through it and live through it with her, I mean, this is a lot of males that that I know now, right, that wouldn't be able to even attempt to walk a step in her shoes. You know? Like, if you really think about it, there's no way. I don't even know if I could do it. You know what I'm saying? You know, she was built different. So, you know, my mom is definitely the number one mentor and role model for me.
Amazing.
Gotcha.
You know, go ahead, Mel. Go ahead.
No, you got it. Go for it.
So I wanted to ask, you say you have 4 daughters.
Yes.
4 daughters. What is the influence that has on you? You know, how has that changed your life as a coach? I know it had to do something.
You know, I'm gonna be honest with you. I was raised by women. Like, I have male role models through football, but my mom, older sister, auntie, grandma, you know.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just another, you know, I'm blessed. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's why you're so patient, man. That's
you gotta have them patience. They cut you down, coach.
So I mean, you have 4. I mean, you stopping, or you still trying to get the boy?
No, we done, Mo. That's it. You know what? I came to, after my 4th daughter was born, I had a dream and realized that every year that I coach football, I have 100 sons. So I'm okay.
Yeah.
So I'm okay. You know,
respect to that, for sure.
Hey man, I want to say a few things. I know we got the hard stop coming up soon, but the Mamba mentality, right? One thing about Kobe is, and I know you said you want these athletes to try, right? And sometimes when they're battling failure or they're afraid to fail, they'll try, but they won't try at 1,000 or 100%, right? So with Coach Moore. Yeah, you know what I'm saying? And Coach Moore, what he's saying with that Mamba mentality, and you could tell me if I'm speaking to it incorrectly, but it's not just try, haphazardly, right? It's like, no, put in that full effort, get past that worry of failure, because that's sometimes what holds you back, right? That's what sometimes stops you from being that greatness, right? Tipping over that line of being afraid, right? Once you step over that line, you don't know what can happen. You might fail, but then you also might see some great things happen. So that's one of the things I definitely wanted to make sure the listeners understood.
I mean, they say you learn more from failure than you do from success.
You do. And it's crazy, man. And it took me as a person and as a coach to really understand that. But that comes with maturity and actually going through the fire, so to speak. Because no one really wants to lose, right? Or fail. Right. But then when you have that self-reflecting moment, like after the loss is over and you get past your feelings, you can really get to the point of, all right, what did I do wrong? All right, how could I improve? All right, if this happens, I'm gonna do this differently. And then you grow, you get better, man. You need success to keep you motivated, right? You need success
Right.
to say, I can do it. But also you need to have that balance, and that's life, peaks and valleys, right? The other thing I want to say is we want people to just hit the subscribe button, right? On YouTube, if you listen to it, hit the subscribe button on that podcast button as well. Coach Moore, I know you listen to these podcasts, man. So we expect you to continue to follow us on those platforms, man. But this has been everything I expected and more. And we're not done yet. We got a few more things that we want to touch on, but these are the reasons why I keep people around, right? And people around me, insulate me with people that speak the same language. And that's one of the things that I really encourage all athletes, everyone that's listening, parents, moms, dads, coaches, right? You got to make sure that you surround yourself with like-minded people and people that are really going to be invested. Invested in your full interest. Be able to tell you when you're wrong, tell you when you're on the right track, but also encourage you through those struggles, because those things that's life changing. If I didn't have a Coach Moore, if I didn't have a Coach Gill, if I didn't have an Ernie Blount to kind of call me through the games that I struggled in, or call me through trying to figure out my next steps in life, outside of my parents, because my parents are, they're real deal. But outside of them, and at a certain age, you don't really want to listen to mom and dad anymore, right?
You done heard them too much.
Yeah, right. So these are the things, and these are the people that you should definitely surround yourself with, like people like Coach Moore. People like
Indeed. You said Coach Blount. I forgot about Coach Blount. He was another one for me too. And you heard what Coach Moore said. Coach Moore said he was reading the other day. He said he's been listening to podcasts and seeking more information. So on top of the like-mindedness, you want people who are progressive, who are trying to learn and trying to evolve and to gain understanding, that much more. So, they bringing something new to the table every few times you speak to them, and they piquing, curiosity. And that's where you get to, that's where you get to ascend. And one of the things you guys mentioning, the Mamba mentality, one of the key ingredients to that is passion, right? Because you can have a Mamba mentality, but if you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's not going to be applicable. You're not going to be able to connect those dots. And so that's one of the things I want, and one of the key things with a lot of young athletes is they lose the passion for what they're doing. And you have to recognize that, because some of the athletes, their why was because, daddy wanted me to play football because he played football, or mom wanted me to play football because she wanted me to get strong and be a little tougher because it was just me and her. And, so we want to dig into that. And you see in a player who's not really connecting, at practice, he's not improving, he's not getting better. His passion is probably waning.
Well, I'll say this, Marlon. This is one of the things I have learned, again, going through this. Don't mistake losing passion. Sometimes they just express it differently.
True.
You know what I mean? Like sometimes it's just expressed differently. Like, and different neighborhoods that I've been to and the places that I'm from, I always say, don't be too cool for school, right? Like, listen, man, I know you care about this. Or you wouldn't be at 6:30 in the morning right now.
True.
And we're working on day 14 in a row and you're still here. I know you care about this.
Yeah.
Right? So really, sometimes don't mistake it, because, not to say kids hide it in people in general, but like, it's sometimes relayed differently, right? It's expressed.
That's true.
If everyone's different, like, so even these young guys now, they wouldn't be talking to you. They have plenty of other things they can do. There's plenty of other outlets. Like, they're not going to even sit down and have the conversation if they're not interested.
Yeah, true.
And if you lose them, they're going to leave the conversation very, very quickly, right? Yeah. If you can't grab them in a minute and a half, you missed.
Yeah.
You missed.
Yeah, you're right. People do show their passion different. And if someone's consistently showing up, there is some passion there, and that's something you could drum up. Something. Right. And, I remember like Mike Demetrius, he was a different kind of cat. He was quiet, but he loved football. He loved football. He was very passionate about the game. He just expressed himself differently. He was kind of more chill, but he loved the game.
Correct. I mean, and I've learned that just dealing with coaching different student athletes from different regions of the country. I mean, the way we attack it in New York is totally different than the way the cats in Pennsylvania. And then
Yeah.
the guys down from Florida, and then they forget the California kids. They are smooth. Like I'm like, come on, bro. Like it's so hard. New Yorkers go get it, cut each other off. Let me go you real fast. I got another point. Hold on. California guys will sit there for 45 minutes and just look at you, and then say something profound, right? It's like, why didn't you say that 10 minutes ago? Oh, coach, I heard you. I was letting you talk. Like, oh my goodness. Next time, I'm talking to you, Like, so just like it's just different. I mean, the region is different, America's different, like everyone is different interests, different passions, different ways to express that passion. To me, if a kid is showing up, he's passionate. He just doesn't know how to express it.
Yeah.
I let him know it's okay to go hard. Like it's okay to be different. Like it's okay. Like if you really love it, like the Mamba mentality, he talks about it all the time. He wasn't, great friends with all of his teammates.
Yeah.
From Jordan, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes I'm gonna go so hard that it's gonna make you uncomfortable.
Yeah.
He even said something similar the other day. He said, they always play the same, 20 clips on Twitter, but Saban said something similar the other day. High achievers and low achievers, and how high achievers make low, guys that don't want to try as hard, very uncomfortable.
Yeah. That's a great point, man. That's a great point.
In my opinion, you got to get kids to feel okay with that.
Even as adults. We say in our program too, man, we try to you got to become comfortable being uncomfortable. Right? We want to make sure you're comfortable, get comfortable being uncomfortable, right? Because that's usually when you're gonna reach the pinnacle of who you're supposed to be.
Right? You grow amidst the discomfort. That's where growth is happening.
Yep.
We all know it's easier said than done.
Oh,
100%. It's easier when it's done. when
it's over.
When you got past that point, it's like, all right, now I can understand that. So
and I can share it with others. Coach, how did y'all play a game yet this season?
We did. So, we lost a tough one to another Division III school. Still in the process of growing here at the University of Rochester. Just another step on the journey. Yeah. But again, it's inspiring because the guys can see it, smell it, they're dreaming it now. So, when you invest, it becomes that much more difficult to accept. And that's where we're at. So we're in a good space right now.
That's great. Awesome. Y'all got week 2 this week, I imagine.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Man, good luck, man. Good Godspeed this week, man. Get that W.
Hey, Coach, man, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your conversation. I appreciate the energy, right? Yeah, man. And also just the overall concept that you come with as a coach. I'm happy that we put this in the I call it every time it's a time capsule, right? So it's out there. Once it gets pushed out in the universe, we're gonna be out of here. 100 years later, it's still gonna be someone that can listen to this information. And I'm sure because of our progressiveness and how we kind of approach it, they may not be able to connect to it as much. But for the people right now that are playing this sport or playing sports in general, this conversation is something that they need to listen to because there's a lot of gems that you just dropped. So I appreciate your time. I respect you always, and I thank you for being who you are, man.
Well, I want to thank you guys because this is my first podcast.
There we go.
And so it took me out of my comfort level slightly. It was great doing it with two guys that I respect tremendously, and I appreciate you having me on the show.
I appreciate your coach, man. Yeah, you needed the platform for sure, man. You have a great insight, a lot to share, super intelligent. And that patience, man, like a lot of people can learn a lot from you, man. So salute to all you're doing. Salute and thank you for the impact you had on my life, when you were my coach. And thank you for joining us today, man. All the best this coming season and in the future.
Well, make sure go ahead, Mel. Go
ahead. I'm gonna ask you for your Twitter, your handle.
I'm gonna say, Marlon, make sure you stay in touch.
All right, we'll do.
I'm following you on social media and all the different things you're doing. It's when you see a friendly follow, make sure you follow back.
Wait, hold on.
What
is your social media, coach?
Oh man, I'm on every platform. All you just type in my name. With that,
let the listeners know though. Put it out there. We want to know your Twitter, your Instagram. We need it all so the listeners can follow you.
Let me pull it up. So on Twitter is Coach R Moore 34.
Okay.
On Instagram, it is, there we go, Coach Moore on Instagram.
Okay. Just at Coach Moore, that's it? Or just
Excuse me, it's Coach R Moore on Instagram.
Coach, I'm following you, man. What you talking about?
I don't believe you.
He said you don't believe.
I'm not going to give out Snapchat information because I don't use it. And obviously,
Okay.
I don't have a TikTok. I'm not doing that either right now.
Okay.
Coach, progressiveness. You gotta get on the TikTok with the players, man.
I'm going to tell you, so even the recruiting process for me right now, I'm going to text you first because most people reach out through text first right now. Then I'm going to call you and we're going to have a phone conversation. Then we'll do Zoom and or, FaceTime, right?
Mhm.
But I don't think your first interaction with a person should be, FaceTime. Like, that's just not comfortable to me yet. You know what I mean? Like, especially when half the time I'm seeing your forehead or the ceiling or your hat. You don't even look into the phone. It's not like you're looking into the camera. I'm getting one eye. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's weird. It's definitely weird.
Right. So I'm not, especially not on the first conversation. I have to be comfortable enough to say, man, put your face in the camera, man. What are we doing?
Right.
And have the conversation from there. So if there was advice for young people, it would be, hey, look in the camera when you're talking.
All right,
Good,
Coach. We know you got to fly, man. So thank you.
Yeah.
I'm